All right, so if you use tools like ChatGPT, you've probably noticed how much easier they can make, well, just about any tough task. But have you ever stopped and wondered what all that convenience is actually doing to your brain? We're going to dive right into that because some new research is giving us a really fascinating and maybe a little unsettling look under the hood.
And this isn't some kind of sci-fi thing that's way off in the future. It's happening right now, every day. So the real question is that AI you're using like a personal trainer for your mind, pushing you to get stronger? Or is it more like a super comfy couch, just kind of letting your cognitive muscles get weaker? Well, it turns out the answer is all about how you use it. So let's kick things off with a new study from MIT. They wanted to see what's really happening inside our heads when we start outsourcing our thinking. And they came up with this idea called cognitive debt. It's a pretty crucial concept for anyone using these powerful tools.
So here's how they figured this out. Researchers had students write essays. Simple enough, right? Some got to use ChatGPT, some used a regular search engine, and some, well, they just had their brains. And by hooking them up to EEGs, which measure the electrical buzz in the brain, they saw something pretty startling. The ChatGPT group showed way less engagement in key parts of their brain. And here's the real kicker. They actually struggled to remember what they wrote and didn't even really feel like the work was their own.
And this is exactly what the researchers mean by cognitive debt. Think of it like a loan. You get this immediate benefit, right? Speed, ease, productivity, boom. But you pay for it later, with interest, in the form of weaker critical thinking, memory, and maybe even creativity. It is literally the hidden cost of convenience.
And this quote just nails why that is. Our brains aren't static. They thrive on a good challenge. That's a concept called neuroplasticity. It's our brain's incredible ability to rewire itself. Mental effort is the workout. So when we consistently skip that workout, we risk letting those really important neural pathways just fall apart.
Okay, so if cognitive debt is a real risk, who's most likely to be taking out that mental loan? Let's dig into this a bit more, because it turns out our own personality, our decision-making style, plays a huge role in whether we use AI as a collaborator or just as a crutch.
So just think about it for a second. When a really tough decision lands in front of you, are you the type to dive deep, do all the research yourself? Or do you kind of look for an easy way out? Your gut answer to that could actually predict how you interact with AI.
Researchers have basically put these tendencies into two main categories. On one hand, you have the vigilant decision maker. This person is meticulous, they're thorough, and on the other hand, you have the buck passer, who would really rather just avoid the decision or hand it off to someone or something else.
So, to put this to the test, a pretty big study took 810 people, gave them a bunch of nutrition statements, and asked them to figure out if they were fact or myth. Now here's the twist. They had the option to ask ChatGPT for its opinion before they made their final call.
And the results you're seeing here? Super clear. People who scored high as buck passers were way more likely to ask for the AI's 2 cents. I mean, on average, they were peeking at the AI's answer a third of the time, while the other group only did it about a quarter of the time.
But this is where it gets really interesting. It wasn't just that they looked for help more often. The high buck passers also spent less time reading the AI's explanation. The vigilant decision makers, on the other hand, when they did ask for help, they spent more time carefully picking apart the information. You see the difference? One group is outsourcing, the other is researching.
The study also picked up on some interesting patterns. This tendency to be a buck passer was a bit more common in younger people, especially those under 18 and in those with a high school education or less. Now, of course, this doesn't mean everyone in those groups is a buck passer, not at all, but it does suggest that some folks might be a little more at risk of leaning on AI without really thinking critically about it.
Okay, so that's the risk of just passively using this stuff. But what about the other side of the coin? What does it look like when someone doesn't just use AI, but they truly master it? What does the brain of an AI expert actually look like?
So let's shift gears from cognitive debt to a cognitive upgrade. A really groundbreaking study used fMRI scans, which are basically these super powerful MRIs that show brain activity in real time, to compare the brains of expert prompt engineers with just intermediate users. And the results? They're pretty incredible.
I mean, just look at the difference here. These are scans of their brains at rest, when they're not even doing anything. On the left, you've got the experts. On the right, the intermediates. Even when they're just chilling, the very wiring of their brains looks different. The experts' brains show these more focused, more potent, and more organized patterns of connection.
So what does all that actually mean?
Well, it means that these experts have essentially built super highways in their brains for complex thinking. Let's zoom in and see exactly where these upgrades are happening.
Okay, first up, the left middle temporal gyrus. Think of this as a core hub for understanding the meaning of words and connecting different concepts. The beefed-up connectivity here suggests that these experts have a brain that's just fine-tuned for playing with language with incredible precision and nuance, which is, the core skill of prompt engineering.
Next, we see this increased connectivity in the left frontal pole. This is like your brain's CEO. It handles abstract thought, long-term planning, setting strategic goals. For an expert prompter, this means they're not just, throwing words at the AI. They are meticulously planning and structuring their requests to get the absolute best result.
So if you put it all together, expertise isn't just about raw effort. It's about efficiency. The expert brain seems to have literally reorganized itself to become this highly specialized, fine-tuned collaborator, perfectly primed for this new kind of partnership between a human and a machine.
And that brings us to the most important part of all of this. We've seen the risks of cognitive debt, and we've seen the potential for a cognitive upgrade. So how do you make sure you're on the right path? How do you go from being a passive user to an active, expert-level partner with this technology?
Well, based on everything we've seen, we can actually lay out a pretty clear strategy. It all comes down to being intentional about how we use these tools. So we're building those expert-like neural pathways instead of letting our old ones just fade away.
Here are 4 steps you can take. First, mix it up. Don't let AI be your only source of information. Go out and research things yourself. Second, engage. Don't just outsource. Use the AI's output as a rough draft that you then actively critique, revise, and rewrite. Third, check in with yourself for cognitive numbness. If you're just not feeling mentally challenged anymore, that's a red flag. And finally, balance ease with effort. You have to consciously decide which tasks are actually worth that mental workout. Ultimately, this is the big mental shift we all need to make. The goal isn't for AI to replace our own thinking. The goal is to use it as a tool that, when we use it skillfully, actually expands our thinking and creates a collaboration that's way more powerful than either a human or a machine could be on its own.
So we're left with a choice. AI is an incredibly powerful lever for the mind. It can make us intellectually lazy, racking up cognitive debt, or it can challenge us to think in new, more structured ways, literally forging an expert brain. The tool itself is neutral. The outcome, well, that's up to you.